All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Circles USA January webinar. Congratulations on making it to 2021. We're so grateful to be here and still doing the work that we're doing. And at the Circles USA headquarters, we thought it would be wonderful to have a common theme, a theme for the year that would amplify our work. So this webinar is to inspire us all in 2021. And our guide for today is our very own Jamie Haft. Jamie started as our deputy director and has shifted into the full executive director role, which she is doing so incredibly well. We are so grateful to have Jamie, and she is based in the Bay Area of California and also brings with her more than 10 years of professional experience building national coalitions for social justice, community organizing, and multimedia storytelling. So we are incredibly grateful for Jamie, who's going to guide us today. A couple of housekeeping details before we get started. This is being recorded and it will be shared in Project 10, the sharing webinar folder on FreedCamp, of course. And for those of you who may want to be able to see the PowerPoint slides and see the speakers, you may want to move your mouse to the top of the screen, your cursor. Well, if you're on a desktop computer, it may be different on a tablet, but if you go to viewing options, there's an arrow that you can click on, and there's an option that says side by side. And that might make it really a little easier for you to see everything, because it'll put the slide, the panelists, and then if you want to open your chat feature, because we are going to engage with the chat today. So you'll want to click on the chat feature to pop it open and have it in the side tray. That way you'll have 1, 2, 3 just ready for action so you can fully engage in the whole experience of this beautiful webinar. All right, I think we're ready to go. So welcome to you all. This is the January webinar for Circles USA. Jamie, take it away.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining. A new year is a great time to reflect on what we've learned, to articulate where we are in the journey, and to plan ahead. So today I'm going to talk you through our latest ideas and resources, and these are in progress. And I'm going to invite you to consider how these ideas relate to your community and how these ideas and resources can be used locally. So this is structured as a presentation with a lot of polls and prompts in the chat for your feedback. And this is also an intro to many topics. And in the coming year, we'll be more focused on each topic, but we wanted to give an overview here in January. At Circles, we help families get out of poverty and we remove barriers that keep people in poverty. What you're learning locally at the chapter level is inspiring the direction that we're taking. The experience of circle leaders are at the center of our strategy. And the ideas that I'm presenting today are a credit to your hard-won wisdom, and I want to honor the collective brilliance of our network. We are growing. I want to celebrate the chapters that started during the pandemic and recognize that we have growing regional hubs. Poverty Solutions Group in Orlando, Florida is growing our hub in Florida and Georgia, and Arrive Utah is leading the hub in Utah. And we have 3 pilot poverty reduction labs that are maturing, and I'll be sharing with you today some of the fruits of their labors. We are nearly in 80 communities spanning 2 countries, 19 states, 44 counties, and 20 cities. And as we grow, we're gaining power in numbers, and we have the opportunity to further elevate Circles as a resource for what's needed now. 2020 brought so many people to the breaking point. Families struggled to make ends meet. Volunteers and staff, we gave everything we had. As we sought a theme, we reflected on the pandemic, social isolation, rising unemployment, the need for race equity, the divisions revealed by the election, and we questioned what can bring us all together. We wanted something aspirational to turn our pain from the last year into purpose. and then inspiration struck. Breakthrough. As we face acute economic insecurity, we can offer the circles model as a breakthrough solution. And why water? The experience of poverty is overwhelming, like you're underwater, but in circles, you can catch your breath. And with a wave, all the work, energy, and power beneath the surface emerges boldly with a flourish. And perhaps even the circle's network is like a wave that helps propel all of us to shore. Let's chat.
Right. So how does this theme resonate for you? Can you take a moment and give some initial thoughts about the concept of breakthrough and circles? Oh, we've got some love in the chat. Oh, and emphasizing the movement. Yes, that it is a wave. I do love how it maybe relates to that tipping point being a wave. But it's on point. Oh, loving the visual, the water idea, very powerful. So thank you for that feedback. We are definitely going to be looking at this, as an analogy, of renewal, power, fluidity. Oh, we say that all the time, that circles really is a solution for all the social unrest we've been experiencing. I have to admit that's about the only thing keeping me sane this last year with all the upheaval. And then, oh yes, and it's a very positive theme. Thank you so much for your comments in the chat.
The first stage of our breakthrough is about vision. Without a vision, people feel confused and lack motivation to change. Hope is important to vision. Pain will only push people so far. A vision must pull people towards something positive. And as a mission-driven organization, we must make our vision even more relevant to this unique moment in history. At Circles, we say we can and should end poverty, but there's not yet collective will to do so. And that's why changing the mindset is high impact. In a culture of poverty, relationships are more about what you can get than what you can give. The tactics follow a formula for poverty reduction, and it's managing the symptoms of poverty instead of getting to the root cause. But in a culture of prosperity, we're building social capital, creating community-owned solutions, and leading change that is long-term. Let's chat again.
We know that languaging is really important. And so it's interesting to consider what are some positive examples of words and phrases being used now about poverty. What are some negative examples? What kind of language are you hearing right now? Oh, Alice, thank you. Asset limited, income constrained, employed. That's what Alice stands for. You should see if there's an Alice review in your state. We use create your legacy to empower circle leaders. Oh, that's a powerful phrase. Low wealth instead of low income. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing some phrases in the chat. And that's one of the great bounties of having our community of practice, that we can share language that might be more powerful or more effective. So I'm seeing things like under-resourced or poverty versus economic vulnerability. And how do we understand that? Could we understand that more because of last year? Oh, lived experience. We use that a lot. Oh, essential workers. That is a new phrase that's come forth very much so. Oh, I love that. How full is your balloon? We hear community a lot more. Economic stability. Oh, sorry, sustainability. Economic sustainability. Yes. Oh, those are fantastic phrases. Thank you so much for typing in the chat.
Great. Since we are in this new normal, this year we'd like to further analyze the beliefs about poverty that are shaping our communities, so we can get really clear in articulating what is the current narrative about poverty and how can circles influence that narrative. Let's talk about how to develop a vision. There are 3 stages. The case for change, it's urgent, it speaks to the moment. When it comes to poverty, what must be changed? The preferred future is hopeful. Can you imagine and describe what outcomes you'd like to see? It's like the world as it is and the world as it could be, and then the strategies that can help close the gap. And in the year ahead, we're planning workshops to support you to do this kind of work. In the transformational map, you are at the center as a leader. What's your personal vision? For example, I'm passionate about issues affecting women. That really guides my life. And then at Circles, my vision for gender equity became a shared vision as I learned that 79% of Circle leaders are women that we're encouraging. So once you have your vision, you align with partners, you learn what's necessary, and you embed policies to make change. Let's do a poll.
So you should see some voting on your screen. Where do you feel that you are at in this transformational map? Are you just beginning with your own personal vision? What do I feel called to do? Or are you getting that collective or shared vision with the people around you? Are you aligning your work and your actions with that vision? Are you learning what is it that you need to figure out to put feet underneath this? Or, there might be growth opportunities that have to happen. There's such a learning curve. And then embed that you've got this already systematized, or here's the way we do things, and now it's almost kind of running itself. We'll give you another moment to vote. I can see the numbers going up. We've got about 35 out of our 49 folks voting. And where are you at? Okay, so I'm gonna click end poll and then share results. So if you wanna slip one past the goalie, this is your moment. Oh, and there was a great reminder from Helen, thank you so much, to ask people to respond in the chat to panelists and attendees, so everyone can see, if it's a comment for everyone, then we all can see the responses. So there's a few nuances in the chat, so thank you for that. All right, I'm gonna end the poll now. And let me share results. And so what I'm seeing is, that a lot of you already know your personal vision, you've got your shared vision, and you've aligned your actions. And so we're in the learning stage of maybe getting to that fuller demonstration of our vision. Oh, that's excellent. Thank you so much for that, for sharing that information.
Very interesting. On to breakthrough systems. In a culture of poverty, government and community organizations are pushing resources down into the system in silos for food assistance, housing, job preparation, and case managers might be checking off boxes, not organizing communities, and thus the outcomes are random and short-term and unreliable. But in a culture of prosperity, it's distinguished by integrated services that build social capital through 5 stages for outcomes that are long-term and sustainable. Let's do another poll.
All right, for this poll, we are looking at, where do you see the biggest breakdown in services happening? So looking at the chart from left to right, do you see that breakdown happening between crisis intervention and stabilization? Or is it between stabilization and readiness? Or is it between readiness and placement? Or is it between placement and advancement? And I'm sorry, there's not an E, all of the above option, but if we had to pick the biggest gap, where is that gap? All right. We'll give you another moment or two to contemplate. I know that you have to kind of picture. Oh, and clarify placement. That was in the chat. So Jamie, will you say something about placement?
Workplace readiness to job placement, and then job placement to advancement at the job.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like the first column of crisis intervention could be just almost any arena in my life that might be blowing up. And then stabilization, okay, I'm getting everything to be nice, even keel. So now am I ready to improve my situation? So the jobs, the education, maybe getting off of some of the services, transitioning, and then placement into something bigger and better, more functional, my dreams, and then the advancement into the full thing. All right. All right, this is your last moment to slip one past the goalie. If you're going to vote, the time is coming to a close. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. And sharing results, it seems that the biggest gap folks are seeing is from stabilization to readiness. And I know that we have spoken a lot, at least in Circles USA and at hands-on training and with a variety of folks in the community of practice, that Circles tends to be right in that, from that space forward, that we aren't a crisis intervention program, but a lot of crisis intervention programs get to the end of the intervention and then say, now what? Well, Circles is the now what. So that's exciting to see that perhaps we are filling that gap. All right, go ahead.
Thanks for sharing. Here's a first example from a poverty reduction lab in Brown County, Wisconsin, about their shared vision and taking it into action. So conversations were convened with all stakeholders in the business of ending poverty in their county, and one-to-one meetings to build relationships were held where each person communicated their own vision and a shared vision became apparent. And this week, all of these partners are co-hosting a poverty symposium virtually for 200 registered to communicate to about their shared vision for the wider county. And here's our proposed structure for how we'll turn the vision into action. At the bottom of this graphic, there are poverty reduction teams, and Circles is one team of many organizations that are working with families with low wealth and coordinating to all identify job pathways for the emerging economy. And then as these teams learn about systems barriers and service gaps, they're sending that information to a planning team that can analyze and create solutions. And then that planning team is sending that information to a leadership team, which is comprised of government, business, and community leaders representing all of the organizations in the county to transform policy and funding. From their conversations about vision emerged a focus to reduce poverty rates for those 18 to 32. And they identified strategies like tackling the cliff effect, childcare, employee retention and promotion, to educate employers and to promote in-demand job pathways. Speaking of which, we are having a breakthrough in our cliff effect work thanks to a new partner, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, which we were able to court them as a partner because of the 6 years of cliff effect work that many of you in the chapters did. So thank you for that leadership. Here's their tool where they're taking career pathways, like this one is nursing, and in a calculator, you can self-identify. So here's an adult with 2 children accessing various benefits. And the red line shows the average minimum wage job. And then the orange line shows the decrease while getting training, and then increases and small decreases as benefits expire. But it ultimately shows the significant gain of overcoming the cliff effect. The Atlanta Fed is starting by bringing this tool adapted to our chapters in Wisconsin and Utah, but our intention is to bring the learning to all in the network. And another breakthrough in our cliff effect work, thanks to another new partner, Leap Fund, from the tech world, who finally figured out how to code a calculator. And on the right side, you can see an example where a participant gets a $1 raise, changing from $15 to $16 an hour, and becomes ineligible for SNAP. Those in our network know that we have been for years trying to figure out how such a calculator could support families, and we're feeling hopeful about this one that developed. And we have about 6 chapters piloting the tool now with the intention to bring it to the network. Another example from our poverty reduction lab in Carbon County. They are developing an integrative community-wide system that intentionally assists households to reach living wages. And this example will end with a resource that you can put to use right away. So here's more information about the types of organization in each stage towards self-sufficiency. Crisis intervention, shelters, stabilization includes counseling services, readiness might have workforce training, placement might have job networks, advancement might have organizations that offer self-sufficiency planning. So our friends at Arrive Utah, Circles Carbon County, and the Southeastern Utah Association of Local Governments, and more of their local partners conceptualized this Google spreadsheet with each tab for a different stage of self-sufficiency, and it's crowdsourced. So all the organizations in the county can fill in their services and categorize it. And thankfully, Carbon County has agreed to give our network a carbon copy. And so we're going to post this soon in Freedcamp so you can get started mapping your community services. Let's do a poll.
All right, so maybe some of you have already been in this arena of mapping your social services, or your jobs and education and services teams have been rocking this arena, or maybe this is a goal of yours. We're just curious, have you mapped your community's social services yet? And of course, this is a judgment-free zone. It's okay if it's not yet, but it's just a really good thought. And have you started? Maybe you're halfway there, or maybe you've done it, but you haven't quite reviewed it yet, made that action plan based on it. Where are you at? Perhaps you've already been in it knee deep, mile wide. All right, I'll give you another moment to respond. Got a few more responses slipping in here. All right. Last chance to respond. I'm going to end the poll. All right, so end the poll and sharing the results. So it's wonderful that lots of you have already started. And, for those of you who either haven't started or you're halfway through, keep going. There's some great benefits of doing that kind of service. And you never know what volunteers that might shake forth, or what kind of partnerships that could pull together. Because of course, Circles isn't a competitive program, it's a cooperative initiative. So it really does help to pull people together, and investigations like this could be really informative for your community.
Great. So let's talk more about breakthrough jobs. Here's an example from Dorchester County, Maryland. Dorchester started as a lab and a chapter at the same time, and they began with research, first comparing the poverty rates in their county to the state and the US, which added urgency to their case for change, and then analyzing that data, which implied some actions, for example, an opportunity to support female-headed households with children. We collaborated with them to research and interview their major employers, manufacturers, trades contractors, and hospitality companies, and to analyze the workforce. And when the numbers were revealed, we realized that there are actually jobs in the county that are unfilled, and there are people experiencing poverty that could get these jobs with the right supports. And so that's where we could figure out how the circles model could help employers fill those jobs. In the interviews, we talked to job candidates, job seekers, institutions in the social service ecosystem, and those employers. And benefits cliffs were named by each stakeholder category across the board. Job candidates called for more inclusive hiring and promotion. Social service providers needed more funding for job placement and advancement. And knowing all of this context is helping Dorchester make decisions about who was selected as a circle leader in order to have the most success in their local economy. And as they convene conversations with partners to create supportive job pathways to fill those positions, talking about the policy change that would be required to enable that. All of this research at the front end helped Dorchester generate a vision for the county as a safe place for all children and families with a local economy that provides opportunities for all. And creating a culture of race equity is the thread in everything that they do. And lastly, this graphic is an example of how you can take mental models that we're presenting from the Circle's headquarters and make it local to your own.
All right, so here's another poll for us to review, to think about your community economics. Have you researched your community's economics? And again, judgment-free zone, but let me read through the options, perhaps not yet, or perhaps you know a few people from the business or economic development community. Perhaps you have an active participation from the business and economic development community, your active partners. And the goal, which I think is really exciting, would be option number 4. It says, we are at the table shaping countywide decisions about business and/or economic development as it relates to poverty reduction. Wow. It's interesting to think where your group might be on that spectrum. Give you another moment to contemplate your answer. And certainly as we talk about empowering circle leaders to 200% of the federal poverty level, this is so related. How do people get there? We don't want it to be empty rhetoric or an empty platitude or a false hope. So it's great to be able to pave the way. All right, here's your last moment to vote. I'm going to end the poll here. And sharing the results, you can see that over half of you know folks in the business or economic development community. So maybe some goals here to get even more engaged, get their participation on your resource teams, or to be sitting at the table with policymakers when these kind of things are happening, because of course, you know experts who have lived experience. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks. For those getting started, recommend listing the major industries and employers in your area, thinking about how the current economic climate is affecting your local job market to find out what's unique about your community's economy. And then this year, we're going to look for opportunities to convene us all together so we can also think about the national trends we're seeing in the post-COVID emerging economy. Breakthrough issues. Let's talk about the big view. Last year, we had a civic participation campaign. Circles has always been nonpartisan, collaborating across party lines, And we wanted to use the election to help chapters educate candidates for public office about poverty. And then after the election, we knew we could hold elected officials accountable to the agenda of ending poverty. And resources are archived from that campaign in FreedCamp. I really recommend the kickoff webinar, which was Civic Engagement 101, How to Engage Your Local Policymaker, as a resource that will be relevant in this year to come. In our 2020 campaign, we had chapters hosting voter registration events. We heard from chapters using weekly meetings to review what's on the ballot, not telling people who to vote for, but talking about how to vote and what do these local elected officials do and what information do we have for voter education. We heard from chapters organizing transportation to the polls. We had chapters host candidate forums where circle leaders could meet those running for office. And we had chapters hosting reverse candidate forums where those running for office could meet very important circle leaders. And credit to Circle's campaign of the Mid-Ohio Valley for bringing that model to our network. Before I get into the specifics of each issue in our policy platform, I want to highlight that the framework we're using emphasizes the importance of designing policies and programs to compensate for the structural biases that unjustly affect people of color and other historically marginalized communities. I thank our board chair, Joan Kuryansky, for authoring this policy platform and for making equity so important to the framing. We surveyed you all about the most pressing issues in your communities, and from that survey, these were the top 6. One is about jobs that pay a living wage, workplaces that are inclusive and safe. In our policy platform, each issue has recommendations at the local, county, or state level and at the national level. And the platform has more recommendations that's what's here on the slide, but I wanted to give a couple of examples. So for jobs, you might be advocating for paid sick and family leave, for childcare accessibility, to promote STEM, to support college for all. Resolving that cliff effect. This is about expanding the initial eligibility for receiving childcare, making cash assistance and TANF more available, increasing the supplemental security income and Social Security, increasing funds under the Child Care and Development Block Grant, and more. Issue 3 is about broadband, which has become increasingly important during this pandemic. Recommendations might be organizing a connected community engagement program, negotiating with local providers to get a monthly rate that's accessible for those with low wealth, supporting and expanding the Lifeline Assistance Program, ensuring adequate funding for the Connect America Fund under the FCC. 4 is about healthcare, top priority during the pandemic, and that includes preventative and primary mental health and long-term, accessible to all. We could talk about reforming local implementation of Medicaid, using digital services such as telehealth, institutionalizing protections that essential workers got, long-term, integrating mental health into public healthcare programs. 5 is about housing, having it safe, affordable, and adequate for all. We could maximize the use of federal programs locally. We could preserve affordable housing. We could encourage the continuation of the moratorium on evictions that started in the pandemic. We could make emergency funds for public housing available. And transportation. We might support transportation subsidies or support safe carpooling. We could ask to fund the community block grants or allocate federal infrastructure funds. So let's do a poll.
So for you in 2021, what do you envision as your key big view issue? We do have the 6 topics, and some people put childcare as part of quality jobs. Some people view it as separate. So we're giving you options, or perhaps there is a different pressing issue in your community. We are absolutely thrilled to see that in 2020, more chapters than ever before have had big view events or themes or activities. There has been a lot more connection with policymakers because of Zoom and the pandemic. We've had access to more people. So, oh, I know, Lynette, you can only, we're choosing one. I know, I wish there were multiple options, but we're trying. So what's your top, the top option for folks to choose? And I know a lot of these are also interconnected, that it's hard to talk about one without talking about another. So it's a complex question, but we're very excited to see a huge growth in Big View activity and people getting their Big View resource teams fully, full complement of volunteers ready to support circle leaders as the advocates that they are, to be seen and heard. And that circle leader driven agenda is so powerful because we have experts right here. So, all right, looks like we're done with our voting. I'm going to end the poll and share our results here. So it's a pretty good spread. Housing is very big, and of course, quality jobs and good old cliff effect. There's a lot to be working on. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks. And if you select a different issue, would you put it in the chat so we have a record of what else people are working on? We are happy to expand this platform. Here's an example of a process for taking on a specific issue. So this example is about transportation. You'll come together on the Big View team and think about what are the needs in our community related to transportation. Is it to get to work, to bring kids to childcare, to attend medical appointments, to shop for groceries? What alternatives are available? Are people borrowing cars, taking the bus, using a car service, taking out an auto loan? What workarounds are people using? Maybe borrowing from a family member or neighbor, using a possibly unsafe car, driving a car without a license or registration. Then a full assessment. How large of a problem is this? What do we already have available? How much will it cost to fix it? Etc. And that's taking the problem through the transformational map. So coming up with a vision, thinking about how to solve the issue, who do we need to align with? What do we need to learn to get more information? And then how are we going to embed these changes? At the Circles conference, we're imagining breakout sessions on each issue to do work like this with your colleagues. So you'll emerge from our virtual conference in April with more of a plan.
I love those slides, Jamie. And in the chat, some other issues that were shared were mental health. Predatory lending is a very big topic. And thank you to the people in our community of practice who have shared their work on that. It's very informative. And then I also appreciate the thought that was written in the chat that we are thinking perhaps smaller, a return to normalcy after the vaccine. So that transition into getting out of the house is really big. So we appreciate, and there's no big or small when it comes to the big view. It is whatever is going to support your people and the issues that are happening in your community. That is exactly the best thing for y'all to be doing. So we appreciate all that you're doing in the big view.
Thanks so much. Here's the circles model. You recognize it. We've got circle leaders at the center sharing their experiences of what they're facing on their journey out of poverty. We have allies supporting them. We have resource teams But we're imagining that maybe the big view could start to receive all of the anecdotes and data and reports from the leaders, allies, and resource teams, and play a special role doing that higher level of analysis, that macro analysis, putting everything together. That's our goal for next year, to enlarge the importance of your Big View team. We heard that many chapters were inspired to get started with a Big View team in 2020 with the election. And so we want to support you to get more organized for action. And here's a prediction for the future. Just drawing on what we're learning from the poverty reduction labs, we could imagine more teams at higher levels. So imagine the Big View team. Once the Big View team has that understanding of the issues that are being faced in the community, could they take it to a planning team with leaders from across the county, across sectors, to really analyze the service gaps and systems barriers and generate some solutions? And could that team take it to a leadership team that was owned by the community, that had business leaders, community leaders, government leaders, who were able to redirect resources and create real change to really move that culture of poverty management into one of poverty reduction? Next up, breakthrough results. We are continuing to find new ways to tell the story of how circle leaders are making progress. Here are average increases in annual income for circle leaders. And here are some new results about economic progress. The University of Western Australia, we had a professor and graduate student this last year crunching our data system, more than 2,000 reports from the last 4 years. And they determined that we have circle leaders achieving 200% of the federal poverty level, but we also have circle leaders doubling their income and going from 0 to 100% of the federal poverty level. And 200% of the FPL is still the goal, but we've heard from chapters that their leaders are reaching stability without getting to that 200% in the way they're reducing their expenses and finding creative cooperative ways to meet their needs. And so we want to offer these alternative measures for economic progress. And we know that mobility is more about economic success, and we've been working closely for the last 1.5 years with Stanford University's team, Spark, and they're promoting that mobility also requires being valued in a community and power and autonomy. So how are we measuring these indicators? We're continuing to analyze the growth of support networks for circle leaders. For example, at intake, those who struggle to name more than one person they can call on for support, by 18 months can name more than 3 people in their network. And we're promoting the use of our life assessment tool. So in this tool, the circle leader ranks themselves from surviving, vulnerable, stable, and thriving at the beginning of getting involved with circles and at every 6 months. And we've put in new line items such as power and autonomy. So on one level, I feel helpless, like I have no control over my life, to growing into, if I really want something, I will find a way to make it happen. Then let's talk about tracking the growth of our staff, allies, and volunteers, because circles changes lives for all involved. And with Stanford University, we created surveys to use when someone is just getting involved with circles and every 6 months. And as we use these surveys, we're going to be able to have new data to help us know to what degree does participation in circles increase the person's empathy for people who are different from them, improve the staff and volunteers' own social relationships, challenge their misconceptions and negative stereotypes of poverty, and even inspire the person to become an agent of community change.
And I want to give a shout out to the folks who are already using this system inside of our database. And for those of you who are doing the quarter one ally staff volunteer demographics, the feedback we got from you all that doing that at the start of the year annually makes the most sense. So you can access those forms on the public forms page. Thank you.
Good point. We are now tracking the data about demographics, not only of circle leaders, but of our whole network, because we aspire to become more inclusive, and we need to know who we are in this network to be able to achieve those goals. And chapters have been asking us for help to make the case for people getting out of poverty, for more data about the return on investment. And we had a team of MBA students from UCLA in this last year take on this question. And so they calculated economic impact in terms of the income gains from circle leaders, combined with the reduction in taxpayer-funded government assistance from becoming financially independent. So now you can see the way a donation multiplies over time. And next month's webinar will be all about data. How and why. Breakthrough relationships, connecting with each other across lines of difference. Our network found so many creative ways to relieve social isolation during the pandemic. And last fall, we had listening sessions to offer support and to begin to develop best practices. And people talked about the toll of the pandemic on mental health for all involved. And so we commissioned a mental health expert to develop tips for facilitation. How can you support people, especially through online social platforms? How can you create safe spaces? What are those best practices for facilitation? And those resources are now in Freedcamp, and we're going to be building on this work in the months to come. Breakthrough stories, using the lived experiences of poverty to guide our approach. We heard so many inspiring stories during the pandemic. A favorite of mine is the circle leaders who saved half of their relief checks. And we continued our series of Lives Transformed to highlight individual stories of people achieving financial and stability during the pandemic. We continue to publish 3 newsletters a month, and you'll notice a new design. And we're planning to launch a podcast as a platform to feature interviews from our network. And the biggest event of our year will be this virtual conference, April 19 to 23. And we've never done a virtual conference, but it's going to allow more people to participate than ever before. We know that chapters were often challenged bringing their staff and volunteers and circle leaders to an in-person gathering. And so we're excited about having more people involved than ever before and more people able to share their stories of the network. In the coming year, let's think more about what it would look like to have a major storytelling campaign so we can change the public's will to believe that we can and should end poverty. So to get started with that goal setting, let's have one last activity today in the chat.
So I typed the question in the chat too, if it's easier for you to see it there while you're typing, but just imagine for a minute that there's an amazing news story about circles that's being published, some breakthrough. So what would be the headline? What publication would you love to see it in? Let's wave our magic wand and make that happen. Although I have to admit, even the stories that we already have seen are amazing, and we love seeing what you publish in your own newsletters, your own newspapers, seeing you on the news, the videos that you're making. And if you haven't all friended each other on Facebook or Instagram or whatever the new fandangled things the young folks are using, you know, whichever social media platforms you're using, please find each other because the stories are inspirational, or you might see something that someone's doing and think, oh, we were just talking about that. Okay, I need to connect with these folks who are doing this credit restoration program. How did you do that? Yes, that's the bounty of our community of practice and supporting each other. So some beautiful creative headlines I'm seeing in the chat is the ultimate new and good. Oh, we would also love to see circles on the national news networks. So any of you who have connections to the big channels, you just get us connected here. Circles Initiative leads the way out of the pandemic and economic crisis for the country, and it would be on NPR. Oh, that sounds good to me. All right, the Wall Street Journal, positive economic impact of reducing poverty. Oh goodness, I love this. One of our circle leaders on Humans of New York. Oh, leaving poverty in less than 18 months, inspired by our most recent graduated leaders. Up and coming empowerment initiative breaks through our community's divides. Woo! Oh, I like a new abbreviation for CNN. It says Circles News Network. Oh, that's so good. Let's see. A group of employers opens a new childcare facility that solves overnight care for children. Love it. Oh, poverty reduction works. USA Today. Oh, that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for sharing that vision and all the work that you're doing. We love this kind of breakthrough thinking.
Those were so creative. We're doing this activity with our board members at the end of the month for our board retreat. So we'll share what they come up with in Freed Camp with all of you as well. All right, the webinar is over, but our work is just beginning. Thank you all so much for the inspiring work that you're doing in communities. It feels like there's so much potential this year to really have a breakthrough. Wishing you all the best and thanking you so much for everything that you're doing.
And thank you, Jamie, for sharing your wisdom and your vision and your breakthrough in thinking. Thank you to everyone who shared of your time today. I know what it means to give up an hour of your time, but hopefully you are inspired and this could really boost or elevate the work that you are already doing with your amazing teams of volunteers in your communities. And for those of you who have been asking in the chat, you will have access to this webinar, the video, when it's all trimmed and pretty and ready for seeing, but you'll also have access to the PowerPoint because we know that that can be very helpful as you're trying to communicate with your constituents. And if any of you need some support in practicing that kind of presentation or help in that arena, please schedule a coaching call. We'd be very happy to support you in the presentations and communications that you need to do for your beautiful community. So to echo what Takoya said in the chat, yes, thank you all. And this is 2021, a year of breakthrough. Take care, everyone. Have an excellent, excellent January.